Good day. Today I'm gonna be explaining uh, tutorial 5 of Spring building Spring Boot Docker images. Cool. So uh, in order to get this REST API application running for tutorial 5, um, I used Docker and created Docker image um, and also placed the application within a container and running it from there. So first thing was creating jar file, right? By running package. So I ran package and then created this jar file um, to basically package the application. Then creating a Docker file is what I did. So I created this Docker file over here, which initially makes up my Docker image, copies, the application into a container. Um, so creating the Docker file, placed the file at the basically this root folder over here, and after doing that, it basically gives instructions for building a container image. And then Docker uses this file as a blueprint to build the image. So here is the Docker file. Uh, Here I'm using Java 21 runtime from Eclipse. Then setting the JVM memory and startup options. And in this line, set the working directory inside the container, right over here. Um, then copy the Spring Boot JR into the container, because initially when I started um the application, I created this JR file which packages the app. So this JR file packages the app by running package over here. And what this copy command does over here is it copies that JR file into the container so that the container is basically holding the application itself. Then here I'm running the JR file when the container starts. So when I run Docker to run the application, it will create the container, and then after that, it will run the JAR file, which is in the container, right? So this line helps with that. Um, so this is basically this Docker image Docker file is setting the Docker image in the Docker container initially. So after creating this, um, went ahead to basically run the application. So I used, see, yeah, Docker build KBE REST brewery. So I used this command, and that initially, um, what it did is it basically created the container that is needed to hold the application, um, and copies the specific application which is in the jar file over here, which I created, copies it into the container by exporting the image, and then I ran the application with this command. And after running the application with this command, the application is now running. So that's how I use Docker to run this application. Then, just to explain and show that the application works in the back end, um, so it's basically a beer application where you can create different beers and update and delete different beers and all of that. So we have our beer load application, which initially um, loads all these beers into the um, database over here. Then we have this customer domain, which sets these fields for customer, and then beer class sets the fields for beer. Then you have the beer repository, which interacts with the data by using find all beer name, find all by beer style, find all by beer name and beer style, find by UPC. Then I have beer service. So I have all the services here. But mainly the controllers which handle the requests, of which I'm going to demonstrate now in Postman. So here I have a get request, um, which is going to list all the beers to fetch all the beers. Get request to fetch a beer by its ID to this endpoint. Get request to this endpoint to fetch a beer by its UPC code. Here's a post request to create a beer. Put request to update a beer. And then this delete request, obviously, to delete a beer by its ID. And then this handles the requests that have to do with customers. Then I have my mappers over here, and the models, which basically declare the fields of our data, as you can see. So yeah, so the application is running using Docker, and it's stored within a container, and I run it with this specific command, docker run, and it's obviously going to be running on 8080 um, localhost. Cool. So start off with a get request to list all the beers in the application currently. So here's the get request to this endpoint. When I hit send, it fetches all that data, as we can see over here. So all the beers, the ID, the beer name, beer style, UPC code, price, all the way till the last updated date. Then we'll fetch one beer by its ID with a get request, of course. So let's say we want to fetch no hammers on the bar. This beer, we'll place its ID at the end of the endpoint, and we'll fetch that specific beer over here. Then we'll fetch a beer by its UPC code. Uh, so, see. So say we want to fetch this beer, Adjunct Trail. We want to fetch it by its UPC code. So we place the UPC code at the end of the endpoint. And then it, okay, so it says 400 bad request. So our endpoint is probably wrong. Let's see. Also, since we're fetching it by the UPC code, I should place beer UPC over here, and then it fetches the beer by its UPC code, that specific beer that we wanted. And then you can make a post request to create a new beer. Okay, so let's create a new beer, and the request will be made to this endpoint, API v1 beer. So create a new beer. Let's give it a new name. see. So we can say the name of the beer. Yeah. And create. Now that beer is created, we can go fetch that beer, um, or we can go check that it's actually created. And when we see here, we make the get request to fetch all beers, you can see the post request to create a beer works. Let's see. Where is it? Uh, Here. So it creates the beer after making that post request. So you can also update and delete a beer by its UID. So that just shows that the application is running and the request to the backend works. So yeah, that is basically Spring Tutorial 5, creating or building Spring Boot Docker images.